Hello, everybody. So, got a lot to go over today. Well, not a lot. It's probably going to be on a fairly short side of classes, but the to-do list in my hand has a bunch of things on it. I guess first off is a reminder about next week, Module 5. So next Tuesday is going to be the next on-campus attendance required day. I scheduled an announcement to go out, I think today. It might go out tomorrow morning. I meant to schedule it for tomorrow morning, but I think I scheduled it for today because I scheduled it at 5 a.m. when I was half asleep. Then at some point later, realized, oh wait, I scheduled that for Tuesday, not Wednesday. But so you may have seen that announcement that next Tuesday will be required attendance day, and then on Thursday next week, not 2 days from now, but the 20th, I will be in Indianapolis for a 3-day event, so we won't have class on that Thursday of Module 5. We do still have class 2 days from now, but I guess 9 days from now. The big topic today is we're going to start talking about normalization, which actually we saw all the steps of it without the technical terms last week. I wanted to do it that way first, and now we're working all the technical terms and quizzes about it and things like that. And small examples that fit nicely in a classroom and are completely feasible to do in a school setting, it's usually very straightforward. But hopefully, I think you all realize that that's not the same situation we'll be in if we're out working as data analysts. They're not going to be small, easy to work with situations. So these concepts, we practice them with the trivial cases because those fit in a classroom. But remember, we're studying them for the non-trivial cases. So I jotted down a note here. So when you're working on a database with, right, instead of student records with 12 people and 5 different courses like we use in the classroom, when you're out there working on a database with 5 million records spread out amongst 2,000 tables, and then there's 5,000 employees at the company all trying to access that database at once, that's what we're studying these concepts for. And those situations usually aren't as straightforward as the ones we see in the classroom. We're just under very tight time constraints. We're halfway done already. It seems like this class just started. So remember, the concepts, they'll seem almost trivial in the classroom, right? When we look at examples like, okay, I gotta jump right to third normal form without any difficulty at all in the stuff we see in the classroom. But when you get into big real world examples, and you have 2,000 or 3,000 tables in your database with millions of records in each one, it's a different situation jumping right to the correct normalization form that you're looking for. So like so many things, I guess going all the way back to 1978, people have said and thought way too hard about it, way too long about it. So what we're going to look at in class today is a set of rules that we can follow. Just really, it's 4 simple rules, although 2 of them could be broken down into separate rules. But we'll talk using the technical term, they sound like 1 rule, but really it's 2 different things. But 4 simple rules that if we follow those, it'll get us in pretty normal form every time. We'll see that in a second. Here in a moment, I want to look at the diagram software I have on my computer. It's not a free version. I didn't see anybody mention it in the discussion board, so thought I would look at some stuff on that. It's one of the nicer ones. I did see a couple people mention Lucid Chart in the discussion board. And if you're going with Lucid Chart, be very careful about paywalls. So when was this? It was spring of 2021, so a couple years ago. A sales rep from Lucid Chart and Ivy Tech and wanted people to start using the Lucid Chart plugin in Ivy Learn. And I was one of the instructors that agreed on that. I was teaching server-side scripting at the time. I was like, oh, we'll find some uses for that in server-side scripting. So they turned the plugin on. Ivy Tech had already paid them a large bill to get the paid service and everything. So then the students had access to Lucidchart. But they're a lot like Adobe. If anybody's used Adobe lately, you pay for your subscription, and then you pay for the function, you'll pay for some functionality afterwards. Adobe takes it to the extreme. If you weren't aware of this, you have to pay for colors. Colors are an add-on fee to your subscription if you use Adobe or subscribe to Adobe. So that's jumping up your bill. And Lucidchart's really bad about that. They don't give you any warning. When I agreed to do that in the class, Ivy Tech gave them a big bill. Students started using it for assignments, and then those students were receiving bills for the things they did there. They would use too much functionality. So, name the list. So I did see a couple of people mention that in the discussion board. So if you're one of the people using Lucidchart, just watch very, very carefully for the paywalls, because it's not just a paid version. After you get the paid version, then you hit paywall, then you have to pay for specific functionality inside of it. And that functionality is accessible from the free version. So even if you're on there thinking you're on the free version, you might still get a bill with Lucidchart. Needless to say, when that sales rep, I went back to the sales rep complaining a couple times. It's like, you said this was going to be free for the students and they're getting bills, and the school paid for the subscriptions and stuff, and was not very happy. And she said there was nothing she could do about it. And those students were just stuck with the bill from the assignment after they talked us into using that plugin. So needless to say, nobody has used that plugin in Ivy Art since then. But if you use Lucidchart, keep a close eye out for those paid, keep a keen eye out for those paid features, because some of those buttons that you can access from the free account will send you a bill from it. Lucidchart is almost as bad as Adobe about that. Last I heard, they weren't charging for colors like Adobe does, but they have lots of little subtle things in there. So I was going to show the one that I have on my computer. It's not a free one, but it's a one-time paid. You pay for the license once and a forever license. So we'll look at that in a moment. Before we get to that, there was a quiz question. I was going back through putting points back on quizzes, and there was one that I noticed a large percentage of people had missed. So I wanted to address that. And the question said, attributes reference column headers. Is that true or false? Somebody want to answer? The statement, attributes reference column headers. Any thoughts? A whole bunch of people missed that on the quiz.
Was this last week's quiz?
This was module 2.
Okay.
It might be module 1. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jenna? Well, the correct answer is false. And I wanted to address this terminology thing that will show back up. If we switch that around and said the column headers, which I'm going to abbreviate this time, reference attributes, that one would be true. That one stumbled up a lot. That one caught a lot of people. So it was probably a sentence from the textbook and they switched it around. Let me write a quick example. I think most people have seen some Python, right? Press switch and use a different language that I think a lot of y'all have seen. This black marker is giving out on me. Let me try my other black marker here. Oh yeah, that works. So I wrote some Python code and said X is assigned the value 2, and then came back and wrote the sentence 2 references X. You know that would be wrong, right? So our variable name, in the case of Python, our variable name X refers to the value 2 that we stored in. So that's what this is saying as well. The column header is our data field. And the attribute is the value we assign to that data field. We use the same terminology in both databases and software development. So that sentence was completely backwards. You can think of it as the column header is like your variable, right? We make that big table, and then if we want to refer to a certain thing, we ask for the column header, and then we get everything in that column, all the values stored in that column. So the column header is like the variable where we're storing these values. That's why that one was false. A number of people missed it. And I believe several people, that was the only question they missed on that quiz when I was putting the points back on there. So I wanted to make sure it was clear what was wrong with that one. They just reversed the words that were probably from exactly written that way in your textbook, so it looked like a true statement. But you can think about it as other software. When we're doing stuff with our database, we're going to ask for the column header, and then we get all of the attributes stored in that column. So the column header references the attributes. Those are definitely the trickiest sort of true-false questions. When they're really, really close to that. Oh, yeah, there's a large pool of questions. And the midterm exam this week pulls from the same set of questions. So if you missed that on the weekly quiz, I think that was module 2. It might have been module 1. I just put the points back on module 2 and module 1 because module 3 quiz is still open for late submission. After it closes, I'll put the points back. But it is in that question is in the pool of questions that the midterm exam is pulling from as well. So you might see it there. Okay, last week's discussion board. Oh, something about discussion boards. I did change a couple of upcoming discussion boards. For module 5 next week, the discussion board is the one that you're required to use a chatbot for. There's some instructions for that, and we'll talk about chatbots along the way. Part of the reason that I actually require you all to use them for one assignment is so I can take a few moments in class and talk about optimizing the results we get from a chatbot. If you're IT experts, you should probably know how to get the best possible results out of a chatbot, not just any possible results. Because anything a chatbot gives you is going to be a really nice sounding sentence. Does not mean that's a true sentence. Do not trust those things. That's one of the big points. That's the main point. But we'll talk about that next week in the discussion boards too. And also, I think it was one of them. Yeah, this is one of those classes. One of the module 7 discussion boards I changed around with a new idea I came up with to hopefully get some improvement in the discussion boards. It might not be the easiest one to work that in, but there was only a couple left. And if that does seem to go well, Right, I'm not gonna try it only one time, I'm gonna try it 3 or 4 times. I'll try it across, several different courses and subjects. And if it seems to go well, I might start doing that with the discussion board so that it's not so boring. But, the module 5 discussion board and one of the module 7 discussion boards I updated. One of them's a new idea that hopefully will make the discussion boards a little more interesting to people. Okay, so now some diagram software. I didn't see the one I used show up on the list. It would have been near in the discussion board as people were listing those out. The one I used would have been near the top of list to use, but it looked like everybody was looking at online options. And this is still an install option, so I'm gonna take a look at this real quick. I'll share my screen. And there's this software in here called Software Ideas Modeler. So kind of a long name, but it's UML diagrams, not just ERDs. We can do lots and lots and lots of UML diagrams. And from any one of them, we can generate code, or we can take some code and generate our UML diagrams for big, massive projects. This one has some really nice features. So I'll create a new project here. But from the discussion board, it looked like everybody was doing, looking at online options, kind of like draw.io. Yeah, I'll skip all the project properties. We don't necessarily need those. And it scrolls really fast. I have to use this to find ERD. There it is. So this is a database class. So from an ERD diagram, we could maybe create tables, do our host diagram. It's high-end diagram software, so it does work really well for getting the pictures together. Let's do a people table, like our example. And maybe people, got the big plus sign here to add an attribute to it. It's gonna need a primary key, so I'll just add the letters PK there. So primary key, people ID. On the other side of this little colon here, I'll type integer or select it from the list. Got the predictive text and stuff. What else do we need? People name, which I'll do as a character, maybe 32 is enough. Add age, which is an integer. And on this one, I will allow null values. Those words are important. So if you're generating code from a diagram or generating a diagram from code, you cannot omit the null and not null options on the ERD. Those are very necessary. You see this? See it, put the little plus sign for the primary key so we can, that's another notation. It's different than the notation our book was using, so different than the one we're using in class, but there's wiggle room in unified modeling language. What else do we have? Age and town would be character, maybe, well, 32 characters probably enough. And some people don't necessarily have a town they live in. They don't necessarily have the data like we've seen before. Then I have this 0 or 1 to 1, m to n, or 1 to n. I'll do a 1 to n relationship. So we're talking about normalization today. So probably avoid the many to many relationships already. We've already seen the preview of where normalization leads to. Oh, what can I do here? So like fade food, and then fill out the picture the same way. So PK for primary key, like food ID, again, be an integer. Add in the item, what it actually is. It's just gonna be a name, so maybe 32 characters. And then add in FK for our foreign key over to the other table. I'll give it the same name. Some people, you'll see it's very common that a lot of people change the name when they bring that key to another field. So when the primary key becomes a foreign key somewhere else, from looking at reference material, it seems like more people change it than no. Personally, I find it less confusing to keep them the same. But I was talking to somebody in this class the other day, and he found it less confusing to change. He found it more confusing when they're the same, because then you have, it's almost like duplicating the variable name. So I haven't ever seen that on the list of actual conventions, but it is it is one of the most common things. You'll see the foreign key uses the pound sign to represent that. So we have this, and then we can do all the stuff that we've seen before. There's buttons here, so you like generate code from this. So if I go to find SQL on the list and choose SQL Universal, generate the code, or this is just a preview of the code. If I come over to the process tab, there's a few things here. You'll notice there's two source code buttons. The green one outputs it. I've never really looked at the blue one until last week, but apparently the blue one works to bring stuff in. And click this and just generate the code. So I'll select the whole project. I don't want to make changes. I want to use Universal SQL, choose some sort of directory to put it in. All this is kind of trivial, right? Oh, I forgot to empty my delete directory. And this is more the high end on the diagram stuff. So this one's used worldwide. So you do have to choose the encoding quite often, because other people in the world, even though Unicode's the standard, other places they don't bother to use that. Like Sri Lanka, their alphabet didn't make it into Unicode, into the 16-bit Unicode. So people in Sri Lanka, which is probably a really bad example because I believe they have English as a second language, but they speak English as well. It's not like India where it became the first language; they still have their native language first, but they all speak English. But their alphabet didn't make it into the 16-bit Unicode, so to do work they would need a different sort of encoding. Then we hit generate. There should be some files here. I put the right spot. Oh, this one. So there's a bunch of SQL files here, which probably better if I just go open them from the text editor. One, because I didn't bother to name anything. Oh, probably should have deleted stuff. So that one was from when I was getting ready. If I open all these SQL ones, there's nothing in that one. There's all our stuff to create the table, generate the SQL code. You'll notice it didn't put the foreign key here. When it generates code, it adds that afterwards. It does the create table independently, and then comes back and does an alter table to add in the foreign constraint. So actually that's not the name. That's not the name I typed in there. It's using what the computer actually. It's using the name the computer knows that field by, not the one I typed in there. So little changes. Personally, I would come over here and copy this over to this one, and then change this to whatever that name was, just because of the way I write SQL code. But the diagram editor, they can do all of that. And you'll notice right next to the source code, which, by the way, it does it for a lot more than databases. A lot of things will do the entity relationship diagrams, because there's not a lot of thought involved in moving from diagram to code or code to diagram. We do all of our thinking as we put one or the other together. And then moving, like if we write the code to get a diagram out of it, doesn't require a lot of thought. We look at the code and just put things together in the same order. Or vice versa, if we do all our thinking with the diagram, turning that diagram into the create table queries doesn't necessarily require any external thought. So machines are great for that. Most of them can do that, but this one of the higher end options can do it for can do that for most of UML, not just the entity relationship diagrams and the class diagrams. So you have that, but right next to it, you'll notice there's also this deploy button. So we could just bypass that text file altogether and send our diagram into machine language and then deploy that. Actually deploy it on a remote server somewhere. And doing that also links the graphics together, so then we can manage that database with the diagram. Which for anything, back to that trivial example, for anything that fits in a classroom would be completely unnecessary and wouldn't necessarily be easier than some of the other ways we'll see to manage this stuff. But in real situations, like that one I jotted on the note, out in the real world where you have a database with 5 million records spread amongst 2,000 tables and 5,000 company employees all trying to access that database at once, being able to manage your database from a diagram is kind of nice. But obviously we don't have time to do that in a classroom, right? That's a very time consuming process. So this is some nice software. We can also upload files. Oh, okay. I didn't see that pop in the chat room. I guess he's already upstream. He has already started his computer. Bring him back in, make sure the audio is working. Is the audio working now, Charles? Can you hear me? Hopefully the audio is fixed. But if not, you might have to restart your computer. Or there's a recording like always. You can try checking it later. So the source code, deploy a database, and I'd never clicked this till I was till over the weekend and looking at talking to somebody about generating the diagrams from code, and that's a very useful feature to go both ways. So we could also just upload a SQL thing here. So if we went and made a file, so like create table, I don't know, stuff. I'll give it I'll spread it out so it looks nice. Stuff ID as an integer. Oh, that was looking weird and I wasn't sure why. Let me change it. So stuff.sql. Then we get the color coding. Name, make that a character, maybe 32 bits or 32 bytes in it. Quality to it. The quality, make that a character with 16 bytes. That's probably enough. Enough for the example. So we could just do the SQL code first and then upload that to create the table from it. Can upload that all at once, or there's a little window over here to paste it. There's a parser thing. Yeah, okay. So there's also this parser. Instead of the upload button, I'm going to use this. If I copy that, paste it in here, you see this thing popped up down here, and we can insert that it went to an odd spot, but get the diagrams from code or the code, get the code from the diagrams, or just bypass the text, human readable text files and deploy it directly from the diagrams. And then when we're on in big, complicated, hard to make sense of situations, we can use the database, we can use the diagram to manage the database instead of the text file. Because the more complicated the situation gets, the more complicated, the harder to follow the text file it becomes. But the pictures, in big complicated situations, we can still follow those. This one's not free software. I believe I've mentioned before, I try to regularly in classes, if you haven't heard me say it. Pay for software is rough when you're a student, right? You don't have money to work that in the budget. But after you graduate and you're out there making really good money, so for everybody in this class, when you're out there making really good software developer money or data analyst money, right? Those six-figure salaries, come tax season, the IRS is going to want a great big chunk of that. So at that point, you're going to have lots of itemized deductions. And the software you pay for is an itemized deduction that will drastically increase the amount, or not increase, drastically decrease the amount of taxes you owe the IRS every year. That's a lot more important once you get your IT degree and you're making really good money. You can download a free, you can just download a version, you get a 30-day free trial. Anybody wants to use that? Today is the 11th. Our class runs till the 14th. So I would recommend waiting till Friday to do that. And then you have 30 days till the end of the class, and the 30-day free trial will make it to your final projects done if you're interested in the software. There are like free versions. There's a free version, then a $60 version. I have the $100 version. So all that stuff I just pointed out was on the $100 version. And you get a lot more tools. So between the free version and when you do the 30-day free trial, you get the $300. So you get all the stuff for 30 days. I would highly recommend that. And every time you close it, it will pop up a box asking you if you want to activate a license. So just deny that until the 30-day trial's over. If you do that, you probably want the free version. The free version can only draw pictures. It can't generate from diagrams from code or code from diagrams. Same thing on the $60 version. The free version is free for personal use. The $60 version is just like the free version, only you can use it for commercial use. Only approved for commercial ventures. I use the $100 version. But 3 days from now, we'll hit the point that we're 30 days from the end of this course. These AWE classes go quick, huh? And at that point, it might be nice to have this high-end software. You get the free trial of the $300 version to finish out this course. And even some of the nicer ones that you all might have tried last week, with the online apps and stuff, when you use a really high quality one, it becomes, you'll notice a difference for sure. There's a big difference in putting the diagrams together and everything. Well, I guess you saw there, when I go to type stuff in, well, there's dialog boxes. When I go to type stuff in, I'm going to add a new field, we get the predictive text box. So there's predictive text like you would use, like you're used to seeing it. That makes things a lot easier, just like text editor. There's a lot it can do, but nobody mentioned it, so I wanted to point that out. Yeah, in the free version or the $60 version, you only get these 4 buttons in the process. And I have the $100 version, and the $300 version, we need more than one ribbon to see all the buttons that show up in the process to have all the functionality it has. But after you graduate, that $300 becomes an itemized deduction business expense. So it's really nice at that point when you're making 6-figure salaries. But that's still a ways down the road. I just wanted to mention that. Oh, there's also this button. If anybody was using draw.io, you'll notice there's an import from draw.io back. So that's by far the most common one in the world. So a lot of people start there. So you can bring your ERDs from draw.io in here and then get the functionality like code generation and all the other tools that you pay for as opposed to the free stuff like draw.io. Just thought I would point that out, let y'all know about it. Sure, save it. Project seems like a good name for it. What was that? It keeps documentation. So that last box that popped up there at the end, I closed it pretty quick. I probably should have pointed to that. That wasn't a survey because the software wanted to know what I was. It wanted to know who just made those changes to put them into the documentation. And it's not a file that it saves. It saves a repository. So it is version control stuff. So it was asking, that wasn't a survey to see who's using the software, like you all may have seen elsewhere. That was asking who I was so that it could put it in the documentation and the repository history. And that way everybody else that worked on that project would know who made those changes, when they were made and what time they were made. That old saying, you get what you pay for. But I definitely understand that pay for software is not the nicest thing when we're in a classroom situation or paying for school, because school's expensive. But after you graduate, it's very, very useful, especially in tax season. So I have two other notes on here because I was expecting to finish up right around this time. For a long time, like last year, I've been really, really bad at estimating times when I'm getting ready. I've been doing better. I was thinking we'd finish that by about 1:35 and then take a break about 1:45, and then we'll do normalization. So I threw a couple notes on here to just talk about things. So if I share my screen again, one of those is over here in database. I'll just make a new database real quick. SQL create database. Delete this. Sounds like a good name for it. So we'll create that database and I guess I can click from over here. Delete this. So if I go in here and need to create a table, I'll just do this very quickly. Create table, people, and just do name, text, age, integer, and town text. So I run that and then go try to look at that table. See some data. Oh, I guess I have to do an insert. Great. Insert into people. Sally, who's 22 from Salem. Gotta have values. Sally, who's 22 from Salem. Okay, so we gotta have that in there. So it shows our data fields and the attributes that have been assigned to those data fields. I just back to that question that a number of people missed on the quiz, and will probably be could be one of the questions you're asking on the midterm. But we don't have any controls to edit those. Versus if I go in like the MySQL one and maybe look at the users table. We'll look at the data here, we see the data fields and the attributes that have been stored in those fields. But we also have all these buttons over here at the left. Buttons to edit it or delete this particular row and The question arises, like, why aren't those buttons over here in this table? And I went and looked it up and immediately realized I've looked that up before. I think like 2 times before, because throw together a sloppy database and then wonder where those buttons are. And it's like, oh, where are they at? And I go look it up and they're like, oh yeah, I've looked that up before, and just, I guess, not paying attention to it. I thought I would share that with you all in case it shows up. After our lecture today, after following the break here in about 5 minutes, maybe between 5 and 10 minutes, hopefully it won't be an issue, because what happened is, in order to get control over our data, MySQL requires every row to be unique. We have to be in at least first normal form to control what's in our data. We'll talk about what that word means after the break. But that means we need some primary key in the table. So it can either come back and add an integer, or if I come over to the structure of this table, there's a button here to make this primary key. So I'll just make, since this one is to be deleted here in a second, instead of altering it and adding an integer and everything, I'll just come on here and turn that into a primary key. Oh, it does not like that. So for this case, I'll turn age into primary key. There we go. Text is too vague to make it a primary key. If we had said it was characters, up to 32 characters, then we could use it as a primary key. But just saying there's some text here is too vague to use as a primary key is the problem there. But now that we have a primary key, if we go look at that data, we get those buttons to control it back. Hopefully that won't be an issue after the break today, but that showed up, and it's happened to me a few times over the years, just usually for small databases that go with one particular piece of software that might not even grow that large. I'll put together a sloppy database, and then if I ever go in and try to do stuff with that database from the GUI, I'll quickly notice those buttons are missing and have to look up why they're missing. And when I looked it up, I immediately, the link was in purple. So I guess it hasn't been that long since the last time I looked that up, and just didn't pay any attention. When I clicked it, I remembered, oh, I've looked that up at least 2 times before. So there's the proper format of database, all the stuff we talked about in class, but there's also the version that it works. And if it works, it works. And I tend to do that a lot, especially on small databases that aren't really that are specifically to go with a single piece of software. Probably shouldn't be so sloppy about them, but yeah, it happens. Another thing I wanted to show, I wanted to work in somewhere and had a couple minutes today, is data sets in our modern world can be really interesting. I find them interesting. Sometimes when I'm in my office, the admin hours, usually not the office student facing office hours, but the ones that are broken on the schedule for doing all the administrative paperwork, I'll just be looking at the raw data sets and making decisions and stuff that way. Other times I find it just interesting to look at data sets, and most states probably have it, but we're in Indiana, so I know Indiana's site. So there is a great data set that we can just go look at. So Hoosier data.in.gov. So Hoosier's by the number. So basically the state of Indiana government database, if you want to go look through the large data sets and kind of see what's going on. we're in a classroom, using this example in a classroom, so the reason everybody comes to school is to get a good job and make good money, so this might be a good one for example. You can see there's lots of different things to look at here. I'll just go to the employment outlook. And basically everything you see on here is a button that you can use to filter the data. We're down here in region 10. So we can see what's going on right in our region. Somewhere there's a filter that would include Louisville. Yeah, it would give like a radius, so it would go across the river and include the job site in Louisville, which is obviously going to be even bigger than the one listed here. But and computer and mathematical. Oh, that's the overall one. So currently, what is that? Oh, it's like Clark and Floyd and Harrison County. Really just, and then some little tab there that I don't think is a whole county, but not a very big region. Maybe up to Scott County, Washington County. But that small little corner there is 2,000 jobs, and it's expected to change by 188 jobs. So they're expecting that to grow by 188 jobs in whatever the data, in whatever the time filter is set at right now. Basically, everything on this webpage is a filter. Click on it, you can start filtering the data set. And it's this huge collection of data that the state of Indiana has that is readily available for you. So if you're just interested in data sets, and obviously you can export things as CSVs and upload them into your own database and probably some other formats as well. And if you're just interested in data sets, that's a good one to look at. Or since everybody here is a student, you might want to look at things like the economic region analysis and the employment outlook projections and get an idea of what's out there, what the job field is going to look like when you graduate here. So, I was showing it because I'm one of those people that just finds data sets to be interesting. There's so much stuff, so many raw facts that we have in our modern world, and they're all organized and set up so that we can just dig through them and turn that raw data into information and find out interesting things. So I like to look at sites like that, so I thought I would share it. Do you have a question?
With the ERD assignment, what type should we save it at?
Any type.
So all type?
Are you on draw.io?
Yeah.
You can just do the share link.
So save it as XML?
Oh, if you go up to the top right corner, since it's on the cloud, at the top right, there's a share button. Just share it with me. That's probably the easiest.
Save it as?
But you don't have to save it. Just share it with me. Do the share file. We'll look at that in a moment.
See that.
Or just download any of them will work. Any of the downloads work. Just download one of them and send me that file.
No, it says save as type and.
I'll look at, I'll help you with that in a second. Okay, so that brings us up to about the time I was wanting to make a break. And then afterwards, we'll talk about normalization. Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? Okay, I assume that means no questions. I would highly recommend that software, the 30-day free trial of it. And we are currently 33 days from the end of the semester. So you might want to wait a couple days to do that, but if you do it now, we will pretty much get to the end of the semester too. Otherwise, 10-minute break sound good? My laptop says it's 1:51, so we'll get back to it at 2:01 by that time. See y'all in just a moment.